Captain James Miller stood at attention before the alien delegation, his combat medals gleaming under the harsh lights of the diplomatic chamber. The tall, insectoid beings called the Rax towered over him, their metallic exoskeletons reflecting the fluorescent lighting. Their mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was amusement. "Your species is peculiar," the lead diplomat said through the translator. "You claim to be a warrior race, yet you have all these restrictions. Rules of engagement. Geneva Conventions. Laws of war." The alien's compound eyes shimmered with what might have been contempt. Miller kept his face neutral, though his jaw tightened slightly. 20 years in the Marine Corps had taught him patience. He'd seen combat in 3 different conflicts on Earth, but this was different. Humanity's first contact with the Rax had quickly devolved into threats of war, and now he stood as Earth's military representative. "These rules make you weak," another Rax official chittered. "In our centuries of conquest, we have never encountered such hesitation to embrace total war." The captain's lips curved into a slight smile. "With respect, you misunderstand. These rules don't restrict us. They define us. They remind us of our capacity for violence, and why we choose to control it." The lead Rax stepped forward, looming over Miller. "Your species has barely reached the stars. You have no empire, no conquered worlds. What could you possibly teach us about warfare?" Miller's eyes hardened. "Those rules you mock. They weren't written to protect the weak. They were written to protect everyone else from us. From what we're capable of when the gloves come off." The chamber fell silent as the translation reached the alien delegation. Their antennae twitched in what the humans had learned was confusion or concern. "You see," Miller continued, his voice carrying across the now silent room, "humans didn't create rules of war because we're soft. We created them because we looked into the abyss of our own nature and realized we needed a leash. Not for our enemy's sake, but for our own." The Rax delegates exchanged glances, their previous amusement fading. For the first time, they seemed to notice something in the human captain's eyes, something old and dangerous, carefully contained behind layers of discipline and civilization. "Perhaps," Miller said softly, "you should ask yourselves why a species would need laws to prevent itself from committing atrocities. What kind of creatures need to be reminded not to use chemical weapons, not to target civilians, not to inflict unnecessary suffering?" He let the question hang in the air, watching as the implications slowly dawned on the alien delegation. The rules of war weren't chains holding humanity back, they were a warning label for everyone else. 2 weeks after the diplomatic meeting, the Rax made their decision. Their attack came at dawn, targeting Earth's orbital defense stations with overwhelming force. They expected a swift victory. What they got instead was their first lesson in human warfare. Commander Tom Watson watched from the bridge of the EDS Normandy as the alien fleet approached. His vessel, hidden in the shadow of Earth's moon, was officially designated as a peacekeeping ship. The Rax would soon learn why humans were so fond of euphemisms. "All stations report ready, sir," his first officer reported. "Stealth systems holding." Watson nodded, his weathered face illuminated by the soft glow of tactical displays. "Send the message to all Earth forces, Protocol Geneva is now in effect." The crew exchanged knowing looks. Protocol Geneva, named with deliberate irony, wasn't a restriction of warfare. It was a precisely calculated escalation of force, designed to demonstrate exactly why humans had created rules of war in the first place. The Rax ships moved with mechanical precision, their formation perfect and predictable. Too predictable. They had no concept of human deception in warfare, no understanding of why a seemingly inferior force would sometimes appear weaker than it was. "Launch the first wave," Watson ordered. From the dark side of the moon emerged what the Rax had dismissed as primitive human missiles. What they didn't know was that these weapons had been designed by people who had spent centuries finding new ways to kill each other. Each missile contained countermeasures that the Raks had never encountered, developed by humans who had long practiced the art of defeating their own defenses. The alien fleet's shields flickered against the first hits. Their communications erupted with confusion as they realized these weren't the simple kinetic weapons they had expected. Instead, they faced the culmination of humanity's long history of warfare: electromagnetic pulses, adaptive penetration systems, and warheads that split into multiple independently targeted fragments. "Second wave, launch when ready," Watson commanded, his voice steady. "Let's show them why humans don't fight fair." The Raks had expected humans to follow the same rigid patterns they did: direct confrontation, head-on battles, predictable tactics. They didn't understand that human warfare was built on millennia of finding ways to defeat stronger opponents. As the battle unfolded, Watson opened a channel to all Earth forces. "Remember your training. Remember why we have rules. And remember that today, those rules are suspended." The Raks' first defeat came not from being outgunned, but from facing an enemy that fought in ways they had never imagined. An enemy that had spent its entire history learning how to win against superior forces. An enemy that had created rules of war not out of weakness, but out of the recognition of its own terrifying potential. As Watson watched the Raks' fleet scatter in disarray, he thought back to Captain Miller's words at the diplomatic meeting. The aliens were learning their first lesson about humanity: sometimes, the most dangerous predator is the one that chooses to wear a leash. The Raks' High Command received the transmission 3 days after their failed attack. It was a simple video message, recorded in the wreckage of one of their destroyed warships. The sight of Captain Miller standing among their ruined technology sent ripples of unease through their command center. "I warned you about the rules," Miller said, his combat armor scratched but intact. "Now let me tell you about the consequences of ignoring that warning." Behind him, human salvage teams were systematically disassembling Raks' technology. Not destroying it, studying it, learning it, adapting it. This was another aspect of human warfare the aliens had never considered. Humans didn't just defeat their enemies, they learned from them. "Your attack killed 37 human civilians," Miller continued, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of human military tradition. "In previous wars among ourselves, we might have responded with proportional force. But you're not human. You don't understand proportional force. So instead, we're going to give you a lesson in human history." The Raks' Supreme Commander watched with growing concern as Miller walked through the debris, pointing out specific pieces of salvaged technology. "See this shield generator? Our engineers reverse-engineered it in less than 48 hours. That's what happens when you attack a species that spent millennia trying to kill itself. We got very, very good at understanding weapons." Miller picked up a piece of Raks' armor, turning it in his hands. "Your materials science is impressive. But did you know humans once conquered most of our world using just horses and sharp metal? We've been innovating ways to kill each other since we figured out how to sharpen sticks. Your technology isn't a game changer for us, it's just new tools for very, very old skills." The message continued as Miller explained, with almost educational patience, how humanity had developed its rules of war. He described the horrors of Earth's past conflicts: the trenches, the gas attacks, the firebombings, the nuclear devastation. With each example, he detailed how humanity had chosen to restrict these methods not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. "You thought our rules made us weak," Miller said, his eyes hard. "Now you're learning why we needed them. Every restriction in our laws of war represents a method of killing we became too good at. Every prohibition marks a line we drew because we terrified ourselves with our own capacity for destruction." The Raks' commanders watched in silence as Miller delivered his final warning. "You have 12 hours to begin full withdrawal from Earth space. After that, we stop following any rules. We stop holding back. We show you every single reason why humanity decided it needed laws to restrict its own behavior in war. As the transmission ended, the RAC's high command faced an uncomfortable realization. They had spent centuries conquering species that fought like they did, with straightforward tactics and predictable strategies. But humans were different. Humans had spent their entire history fighting themselves, developing countless ways to defeat superior forces, to turn weaknesses into strengths, to win when victory seemed impossible. The Supreme Commander looked at the countdown timer that had appeared on all their screens. 11 hours and 47 minutes remained. For the first time in their species' history, the RACs faced an enemy that didn't just want to win, they wanted to teach a lesson. And the curriculum was written in the blood of humanity's own violent past. The 12-hour deadline passed. The RACs, in their pride and arrogance, had chosen to ignore humanity's warning. They believed their superior numbers and advanced technology would prevail. They were wrong. General Robert Parker stood in Earth's Combined Military Command Center, watching as hundreds of red dots appeared on the strategic display. The RACs had launched a massive counterattack, sending their entire reserve fleet toward Earth. Their ships moved in perfect formation, their tactics unchanged despite their previous defeat. "They still don't understand," Parker muttered, then turned to his staff. "Execute Operation Pandora." Across Earth's solar system, hidden weapons platforms activated. These weren't the defensive systems the RACs had expected. These were the products of humanity's darkest military research, projects that had been banned on Earth, weapons deemed too horrible to use against fellow humans. "First wave, release the nanite swarms," Parker ordered. Clouds of microscopic machines, each programmed with centuries of human knowledge about killing, streamed toward the RAC's fleet. These weren't simple destructive devices, they were the culmination of humanity's understanding of death at the smallest scale. The RAC's ship's shields, designed to stop energy weapons and physical projectiles, did nothing against the invisible threat. The nanites bore through hull plating, multiplied inside ship systems, and turned the aliens' own technology against them. "Second wave, deploy the mimetic weapons," Parker commanded. This was something the RACs had never encountered, warfare that targeted the mind itself. Human scientists had spent decades studying how to break alien psychology, developing messages and images that could shatter non-human minds. The transmissions began, carrying cognitive weapons designed specifically for RAC's neural patterns. In their command ships, RAC's officers began to experience confusion, their hierarchical thought patterns disrupting as they encountered human concepts they were never meant to process. Their rigid military discipline became their weakness as human psychological warfare exploited the very predictability they had been so proud of. "They thought we were primitive because we didn't conquer the stars," Parker said to his staff. "They never understood that we spent our time learning how to fight enemies stronger than ourselves. How to turn their strengths into weaknesses. How to win when we shouldn't be able to." The strategic display showed the chaos spreading through the RAC's fleet. Ships fired on their own allies, crews surrendered to empty space, and entire battle groups retreated from phantom threats created by human electronic warfare. "Third wave," Parker ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "Release the forbidden protocols." These were the weapons that humanity had developed and then locked away, not because they didn't work, but because they worked too well. Devices that ignored the laws of physics in ways that made their creators shudder. Weapons that had been banned not by treaty, but by the nightmares of their own inventors. As the RAC's fleet crumbled, Parker opened a channel to all Earth forces. "Remember this day. Remember why we created our rules of war. And remember what we're capable of when those rules no longer apply." The battle wasn't just a defeat for the RACs, it was a demonstration. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy showed them exactly why humans had created laws to limit their own warfare. Each devastated ship and broken battle line proved why humanity had chosen to put restrictions on itself. In their dying transmissions, the RACs finally began to understand. They hadn't faced a weak species that needed rules to protect itself. They had faced a species that needed rules to protect everyone else from what it could do. And now, those rules no longer applied. The emergency meeting of the RAC's High Council was interrupted by a single human transmission. Every screen in their underground bunker lit up with images from Earth's military history. Captain Miller's voice narrated what they saw. "You're watching footage from what we call World War II, Miller explained as scenes of massive tank battles, aerial bombardments, and naval warfare played out. This was just one of our global conflicts, fought before we had even split the atom. Before we had computers. Before we reached space." The RAC's leaders watched in horror as the presentation continued, showing the rapid evolution of human warfare through the centuries. Each advance in technology brought not just new weapons, but new ways of thinking about combat itself. In just a few hundred years, we went from fighting with gunpowder to developing weapons that could crack planets, Miller continued. But that's not what makes us dangerous. What makes us dangerous is how we think about war. The screens showed historical reconstructions of human battles, Alexander's phalanxes, Napoleon's artillery, guerrilla fighters defeating superior forces with cunning and determination. Each scene demonstrated humanity's endless creativity in warfare. One of the younger RAC's counselors spoke up. How did you not destroy yourselves?" "That's the point we've been trying to make," Miller replied. "We came close. Too close. That's why we created rules. That's why we bound ourselves with laws and treaties. Because we looked into the abyss of our own nature and realized we needed limits." The central screen switched to live footage of RAC's ships being systematically dismantled by human salvage teams. Engineers were already adapting alien technology, improving it, combining it with human innovations in ways the RACs had never considered. "Your mistake wasn't attacking us," Miller explained. "Your mistake was thinking our rules were chains holding us back, rather than warnings to everyone else. You thought we fought like you do, with rigid doctrine and predictable tactics. But humans? We fight like humans. We adapt. We improvise. We overcome." The council chamber fell silent as Miller delivered his final point. "Right now, your empire is transmitting orders to launch a counteroffensive. Don't. Those orders won't reach your fleets anyway, we've already taken control of your communication networks. We didn't just defeat your ships, we're assimilating every piece of technology you used against us." The RAC Supreme Leader, his exoskeleton showing signs of stress, finally spoke. "What are your terms?" "The same terms we always offer: rules of engagement. Laws of war. Restrictions on military conduct. But this time, you're going to understand why these rules exist. You're going to help us enforce them. Because now you know what happens when humanity fights without restrictions." As the transmission ended, the RAC's council faced a devastating realization. They had spent generations believing themselves to be the galaxy's greatest military power. Now they understood that they had simply never met an enemy that truly understood war, an enemy that had spent its entire history learning from conflict, adapting to threats, and developing ways to defeat superior forces. The Supreme Leader looked at the damage reports flowing in from across their empire. Human forces weren't just winning battles, they were revolutionizing warfare with each engagement, combining RAC's technology with Earth's military doctrine in ways that should have taken decades to develop. "Send the surrender signal," he ordered. "And begin transmitting all our military archives to Earth." "All of them?" another counselor asked, shocked. "Yes," the Supreme Leader replied. "They've earned the right to know everything we know about war. And we've earned the right to learn why they created rules to limit themselves." 1 month after the RAC's surrender, representatives from both species met aboard the neutral space station Unity. The massive structure, hastily constructed using combined human and RAC's technology, stood as a symbol of what could be achieved when civilization triumphed over conquest. Commander Tom Watson sat across from the RAC's Supreme Leader, the table between them covered with holographic displays showing the proposed treaty terms. Captain Miller stood by the window, watching Earth shine in the distance. "Your civilization," the Supreme Leader began, his translator conveying a new tone of respect, "has changed everything we thought we knew about warfare. And about peace." Watson nodded. "War isn't about who has the biggest fleet or the most advanced weapons. It's about understanding your enemy, understanding yourself, and understanding why limitations are necessary." The holographic displays showed the new combined military doctrine being implemented across former RAC's territory. Human instructors were teaching alien forces about asymmetric warfare, adaptive tactics, and most importantly, the vital importance of ethical constraints. "We've studied your World War II, the Supreme Leader said. "Your Cold War. Your Age of Terror. Each time humanity faced extinction, you pulled back from the brink. You chose to create rules instead of pursuing total victory. We never understood why until now." Miller turned from the window. "Because total victory often means total destruction. We learned that the hard way. Every rule in our laws of war was written in blood, usually our own." The displays shifted to show the new Joint Defense Force being established. Human and RAC's ships patrolled together, their crews learning from each other. The aliens were teaching humans about their advanced technology, while humans taught them about innovation, adaptation, and the importance of questioning rigid doctrine. "Your species," the Supreme Leader observed, "possesses a unique combination of traits. You have the intelligence to create devastating weapons, the wisdom to fear them, and the strength to restrict yourselves from using them." Watson activated a new hologram, showing the proposed galactic rules of warfare. The document combined the best of human military ethics with RAC's technological knowledge, creating something new, a framework for civilized conflict that acknowledged both the reality of war and the necessity of limits. "These rules," Watson explained, "aren't just about protecting the weak or ensuring humane treatment of prisoners. They're about protecting ourselves from our own worst instincts. About remembering that victory without honor is just another form of defeat." The Supreme Leader extended his primary manipulator appendage, the RAC's equivalent of offering a handshake. "We accept these terms. Not because we were defeated, but because you showed us a better way to be strong." As the treaty was formally signed, Miller addressed the assembled representatives of both species. "This isn't just a peace treaty. It's a recognition that true strength isn't about having the most powerful weapons, it's about having the wisdom to know when not to use them." The station's observation deck offered a view of the combined fleet, human and RAC's ships flying together, their crews no longer enemies but partners in maintaining a new kind of peace. A peace built not on the absence of conflict, but on the understanding of why conflict must have limits. "We're not done fighting," Watson told the Supreme Leader. "There will always be wars. But now we fight them together, bound by rules we both understand and respect." The Supreme Leader's translator conveyed agreement. "Because now we know, the most dangerous species in the galaxy isn't the one with the most weapons. It's the one that chose to create rules to limit itself, knowing exactly what it's capable of when those rules are broken." 5 years after the Treaty of Unity, Captain Miller stood before the graduating class of the First Joint Military Academy. Human and RAC's cadets sat together in the massive auditorium, their presence a testament to how much had changed. "When I first met the RACs," Miller began, his voice carrying across the silent room, "they thought our rules made us weak. Today, you sit here as proof of how wrong that assumption was." The display behind him showed footage from the brief but devastating war, now used as teaching material across both civilizations. Each battle had become a lesson, each engagement a study in why rules of warfare existed. "But this academy isn't about teaching war," Miller continued. "It's about teaching wisdom. The wisdom to know when to fight, how to fight, and most importantly, when to stop fighting." In orbit above, the combined fleet conducted training exercises. Rax ships now moved with human unpredictability, while human vessels employed advanced alien technology. But more importantly, both species had learned from each other's mistakes and successes. Your generation, Miller addressed the cadets, will be the first to truly understand both perspectives. You know the Rax's technological precision and humanity's adaptive creativity. You understand both the need for rules and the terrible power of breaking them. The screens showed new footage, joint peacekeeping missions, humanitarian operations, and diplomatic initiatives. Humans and Rax working together not just in military operations, but in spreading a new philosophy throughout the galaxy. Other species watch us now, Miller said. They see former enemies becoming the strongest of allies. They see what can be achieved when advanced technology meets human ingenuity. But most importantly, they see why we choose to limit ourselves. Commander Watson, now Admiral Watson, stepped forward to join Miller at the podium. Each of you represents the future we fought for. Not a future without conflict, we're not that naive. But a future where conflict has meaning, purpose, and most importantly, limits. The Supreme Leader's successor, now called the High Administrator, added his own words through the translator. We thought humans were contradictory, warriors who rejected total war, soldiers who created rules to limit themselves. Now we understand that this very contradiction is their greatest strength. Miller looked out at the faces before him, human and alien, united in purpose. You're not just soldiers anymore. You're guardians of a new way of thinking about warfare. You understand that the strongest warriors aren't those who can destroy the most, but those who know precisely when to hold back. The ceremony concluded with a tradition that would have been unthinkable years ago, human and Rax cadets reciting together the new Code of Military Ethics, a document that combined the best of both species' military traditions. As the graduates filed out, Miller remained at the podium, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. A Rax cadet approached him, mandibles clicking in what he now recognized as respectful attention. Sir, the cadet asked, do you ever regret having to teach us the hard way? About why your rules existed? Miller smiled slightly. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the most important ones. You needed to understand not just the rules, but why they exist. Why a species capable of such devastation would choose to limit itself. The cadet's translator conveyed understanding. Because true strength isn't in the weapons we possess, but in knowing why we choose not to use them. Exactly, Miller replied. Remember that when you're out there. The galaxy is watching. Show them what real strength looks like. As the last cadets left the auditorium, Miller looked out at the stars through the massive window. Somewhere out there, other civilizations were learning the lesson the Rax had learned. That humans weren't weak for having rules of war, they were terrifying precisely because they needed them.